Welcome to the Unabridged Podcast. I'm Ashley.
And this is Jen.
Join us for bookish episodes and check out our website, unabridgedpod.com, where you can find lots of new bookish content to grow your TBR.
Sign up for our newsletter to find out more about online book discussions and upcoming events. Find us on Patreon for extra unabridged content. Join us on Instagram and Facebook at Unabridged Pod and message us there or see our website to get plugged into the Unabridged community. You want opinions about books? We've got them. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unabridged. This is episode 306, Book from a Favorite Author's Backlist. So this is one of our Unabridged Podcast Reading Challenge categories for this year, and we thought we'd offer some suggestions and just reflect a little bit on the category. Before we get started, we're going to do our Bookish Check-in. Ashley, what are you reading?
So one of the books I'm reading is Laura Dave's The Night We Lost Him. I have read a couple of her other books, and one of them I really loved, and the other one I had more complex feelings about. But I have access to this thanks to Libro FM's ALC program. One of the things I love about Dave's books is the way that they just grab you right from the beginning. And so this one focuses largely on Nora. So we get several different perspectives in the book, and some of them we get a tiny glimpse of, and some of them we have more. But Nora is really the focus. And we see her, she's wildly successful in her career, but she is grieving the loss of her father, Liam. And he was a really complicated man. He had several different marriages. He had different families. And Nora and her mom were the first of these series of families. And so her brother, her estranged brother, who I guess technically is her half-brother, they share Liam as the father, Sam, contacts her. He'd been trying to contact her quite a bit, and she had successfully ignored him. And finally, he essentially sets up a viewing of a home and has his fiance set it up so that Nora gets there not realizing it's Sam. So he comes in, and she's really taken aback, but he's like, please hear me out before you walk away. And essentially, he wants to raise questions about what had been treated as an accidental death when their father, Liam, had died. And so he presents a few reasons for why this is. Again, she was already estranged from him. She has a pretty complicated relationship with his whole family, was treated really badly by his mom. So she is has always tried to keep her distance from a lot of the larger complexities of the family dynamics, and has always instead she did have a good relationship overall with her, albeit a complicated one, with her dad. But Sam has some pretty compelling reasons to be raising some questions, and so he kind of sucks her in. And so it becomes very much like a Sam and Nora on a journey to try to uncover all the mystery around what was going on in their dad's life leading up to the time of his accidental death. And I mean, I'm finding it really compelling. I love the way that Dave creates these really complicated but very human characters who I think we love, but we see their flaws, and we want good things for them, but we also see how they're really hurting themselves. And we see that in each of the characters in this circumstance. So, it's not just discovering more about their father and his very complex life, which, they're kind of learning is even more complicated than they thought it was. But it's also, we see Nora and her own layered existence, and Sam, and the way that she and Sam are getting to know each other, I find really sweet as well. And so, yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm interested to see what resolves. It's very much got a propulsive plot that has a mysterious component. So again, that is Laura Dave's The Night We Lost Him.
Yeah, I love that one. I listened thanks to Libro FM as well. And it was one of those, I was looking for chores to do so that I would have a reason to listen because I found, I really love her writing. I think she's excellent. That balance of propulsive plot and really well-developed characters, I think can be difficult to strike, but she does it every time, I think.
Yeah, she is one where I'm I should read all of her works because I really enjoy every one that I have listened to or read. What about you, Jen? What's a book you're reading?
I am listening to Trent Dalton's Boy Swallows Universe, and I'm almost done with this one. I think I have like 20% left. It is pretty long. It's not quite 20 hours on audio, but it is well over 10. And it is about a boy named Eli Bell who is growing up in Brisbane, Australia. It starts in 1983. And Eli is at the beginning, I believe he's 13. And his life is incredibly complicated. So he does not really know his father. He is being raised by his mother and his stepfather, but his mother is currently in jail, and his stepfather is a heroin dealer. He has an older brother, Gus, who is a real source of strength for him. Gus has not spoken. He can speak, but he has not spoken since they were very young. And starting this book, I just did not know what I was getting into, but it turns out that Lyle, though he is a drug dealer, really is trying to do the right thing in raising these boys and trying to be really upfront about the choices he's made that he regrets and the way he got sucked into the life that he leads. And one of Eli's focuses throughout the book is what it takes to be a good person and if the people around him are good people or bad people. His babysitter is named Slim, and he was imprisoned for a while for murder. But the reason he is famous is because he is one of the few people who escaped from prison more than once. And so there are all these lessons that he is learning from all of these people around him who, despite their poor choices, are trying to guide these kids to make better choices. So there's a setup there for a lot of trauma and a lot of tragedy, and those are definitely a part of the book. But there's also a lot of humor, and there's a lot of love and tenderness in the book, despite the circumstances. Eli is just a joy. So the part that he's gotten to the age of 17 in the part I'm at. So it covers several years of his life. And he has always wanted to be a crime reporter because when he's interviewing for a job, he tells them that he wants to do that because he wants to figure out why people commit crimes. Like, what is the decision-making moment that sort of shapes the rest of their lives? And so you just see the way he's really reflective about the life he's been leading and the way that it has been shaped by the choices those around him have made. He's friends with a boy whose mother runs this big Vietnamese gang in Brisbane. I mean, it is just everywhere he turns, there's criminal activity, and yet there's an innocence to his narration that is really lovely. I will say the audio I would highly recommend. At first, I was a bit skeptical because there's a lot to keep up with. I don't want to get too far into spoiler territory, but I will just say controlling a lot of the criminal activity in Brisbane is this man named Titus Brosh, and he does some things that make Eli see him as sort of the big bad and really want to take him down. And so that is a through line in the book. There are also these elements that I'm still trying to figure out. Gus sometimes has flashes of the future that come true. And so there's this part that Gus, from the time he was little, tells Eli that times are tough now, but everything's going to work out in the end. So there's this eternal hopefulness that Eli really tries to keep going. Anyway, it's turned out to be a really beautiful book. I'll be interested. I'm doing this one as a buddy read with Tony, and I'll be really interested to discuss it because I do think it's quite complex, and I think it treats characters with a lot of nuance and allows them to be more than one thing, which I am really enjoying. So that is Trent Dalton's Boy Swallows Universe.
Wow, Jen, that sounds great. I don't know that I've heard of that.
I hadn't either until this was offered as a buddy read selection, so I don't feel like it's gotten tons of attention, but it was adapted, though. There is a Netflix, I don't know if it's a series or a film, so I am planning to watch that after I finish the book. So, yeah.
Wow.
All right, well, we are going to move on to our main discussion. So each of us chose a favorite author and chose a book from that person's backlist. Ashley, what did you choose and why?
So longtime listeners would know that I really love Jessie Q. Sutanto. She is definitely one of my favorite authors. I've read all of her, like the Dial A for Auntie series and also the Vera Wong books. and often they are favorites of mine for the year. I love her humor. I love the way that she puts all of her characters together. I also love the way the characters show up for each other. So Susanto has tons of books, and she covers several different genres. So even though I've read a lot of her stuff, she has way more than I have read. The one that I chose to read on her backlist is a young adult book. And I don't know if it's classified as a thriller, but it definitely is thriller-like. And so this one's called The Obsession. And I listened to this thanks to Libro FM. And it was one that I had received it as an ALC, but it came out quite a while ago. And I don't know if the audio just came out later. I'm not sure. But anyway, when it showed up, I was like, oh, I can't wait to read this. And then I just didn't get to it. So I have had that on my audiobook shelf and just haven't made time. I'm going to tell a little bit about the plot, but I also will just say, since we're talking about Backlist, that it is fascinating when you read authors' works and they can write in very different genres, when they write in for different age groups. Like we've talked about this on episodes before. It's just, I really admire authors who can do that. And this one was not funny at all. There was absolutely not a moment that I found humorous. And also, normally I find her characters so endearing, and I did not find that at all either in this. I don't want to give spoilers, and I actually feel like I was just pulling up the summary, and I feel like even the publisher's synopsis gives what I consider to be a substantial spoiler. So I'm just going to say this one focuses on two main characters, Logan and Delilah. We do get both of their perspectives as protagonists. And Logan is a very complicated kid, and he is really well liked at school. He is an athlete. They're at this very high-end, expensive school. And we know in the beginning that something had happened a couple of years ago that really affected him. Someone had died. It had clearly upset him, but we don't know all the stuff. So he's kind of like trying to come back out of his shell after this tragic event had occurred. And then we have Delilah. And Delilah, her father passed away. And after he died, the life insurance money made it possible for her to go to the school. And so her mom is sending her to the school because she wants to help her with her opportunities for college. Particularly, there's a school in Singapore that her father had gone to. He was from there, and she really wants to go to that university. So they're kind of hoping that this opportunity for the last year of her high school career will help her get ready to go and have more opportunities to go. So she's in the process of applying for colleges. She wants to do early admission for the school in Singapore. And so that's kind of why she's there, but she's new. And so it's definitely a school where lots of people have been there for a very long time. She shows up, and immediately Logan is very interested in knowing her. He kind of sees her, and right away she reminds him of someone. It catches his interest. And so he starts wanting to learn more about her. And as the title, The Obsession, suggests, he thinks that he's being really romantic, but he does a lot of deep digging to find out a lot of things about Delilah. And at first, as she's getting to know him, those things seem appealing to her. But then as she realizes the extent of what he's doing to have that information, she starts getting off-put by it. So there is this precipitating event that, again, I think the synopsis does say what that event is, but I feel like it's a big spoiler. So I am not going to say what the event is. But Logan is aware of the event, and it profoundly affects the dynamics between Logan and Delilah. So it is a really complicated situation where there's a lot of secrets. There is a lot of mistrust, and there are a lot of complicated characters doing some pretty shady things, and also like dealing with really bad circumstances. So Delilah, again, I just don't want to spoil. I will say, like, her home circumstance is really complicated, and her mom, after her dad died, who they had a great relationship, but after that, there's been a series of boyfriends, all of whom have been really destructive. And there is, at the time that Delilah's starting to go to the school, her mom is dating somebody who is in law enforcement, who's in an investigative space, and he is not what he seems. So she's got a lot going on at home. at first, Logan is sort of helping with that, and then things sour a bit. So it was really compelling. But again, for somebody where I am such a huge fan of Sutanto, I still think it is a really well-crafted book, very well-told book, but it was just fascinating to me because it is just so different from the tone, everything of the books that I've read of Sutanto's. And I think what I really admired was thinking about how a lot of the same kinds of events happen, actually, but they are shaped so differently by the tone. So I think it's a really fun kind of author study to think about how the way that we shape our characters and the tone and the style profoundly affects like the mood of the book. And so I think that's really interesting. So will I read all of Sutanto's thrillers? I don't know. Maybe not. But I really did enjoy this one, and I enjoyed the reading experience. And I think it's fun for the reading challenge because it does remind me of why it's like worthwhile to go back and read Author's Backlist and like just think about how, I mean, she just has such a range of things that she writes. And I think that's really cool. So again, that's Jessie Q. Sutanto's The Obsession.
I have only read one of Sutanto's thrillers, but I hate the term unlikable characters, but they were very unlikable characters. And I had a hard time connecting with any of them. But again, it was also very compelling. When you were talking, I couldn't help but think of those twisted trailers where they'll take Elf and the narrator will make it seem like it's a stalker film, or Mary Poppins. And yeah, so I kept thinking of that, like just what you do to change the tone of something. So that's really interesting.
Yes, I think that was a part that I think you're right, Jen. Like, I just didn't like any of them. And I think it's not that you have to like characters. And like I said, I think we can really challenge even the idea of unlikable characters or what that means. But I kept thinking, what do I want to have happen? And I had a really hard time filling in that blank. So I feel like, whereas in some of her other books, I feel so much empathy toward the characters, in this situation, even though for each of them, I felt like on the surface, it was very clear that they had had these really hard circumstances and they really needed help. And yet I was like, make better choices. Like, And so I think it is exactly what you said of like, yes, it's almost like there was this music playing the whole time and the music track was just so different from her other music track for her other books. And I think that's just such an interesting thing to think about. So anyway, what about you, Jen? What was your backlist pick?
So I chose a work by Elizabeth Strout. She is an author. I first read Olive Kitteridge, and I just loved her ability to write characters, again, as I said earlier, about Boy Swallow's universe in a really complex way. So if you've read Olive Kitteridge, you may know she is a very challenging character. And there are a lot of people in her small town who do not like her. And yet you can see the moments of grace and that Strout is able to write so well. So I really love her books. First of all, the writing is always beautiful. She has this very spare style that I think is so lovely. And she does write about some really challenging events that have happened. And she writes about characters who are sometimes challenging for the people around them to like. And yet she finds moments of grace for all of them. So The Burgess Boys is the book I'm choosing to talk about. And this was written pretty early in her career. One thing that I really like about Strout is she sort of has this extended universe, not quite the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but something similar where characters will show up again. So it's funny because I recently read, I'll have to look up the title, but one of her books, and Bob Burgess is a character in that book. And it was fine that I had not read this earlier book, The Burgess Boys, but now having read it, I can see the way she's been developing this character over multiple texts. Anyway, so The Burgess Boys is about the Burgess family, which actually is 2 boys and a girl. So it's Jim and Bob and their sister Susan. And they were raised in Shirley Falls, Maine. And as soon as they became adults, Jim and Bob left, and they are now living in New York City. They are older. I think they're in their 50s. Jim is widely acknowledged as the successful member of the Burgess family. He and Bob are both attorneys, but Jim had this major case that made him famous. And there was talk that he might run for governor. He definitely leads a more glamorous life. Bob is quieter. He leads a quieter life. He works as an attorney pro bono a lot. And he is divorced now and has a lot of regrets about his marriage. So predominantly, this story is told from Bob's perspective, though it will flash into other characters' points of view. But I would say his is the dominant perspective of the book. Their sister, Susan, has never left Shirley Falls. She was married and had one son, and her husband left her when her son, Zach, was fairly young and now lives, I think, in Sweden and really has no contact with Zach at all. And she lives a pretty sad life, and Zach is quite lonely. You don't feel like they know each other very well. And the precipitating event of the whole plot, and this is pretty horrible, so I do feel like I need to say it, but Zach has took a hog head and threw it in the doorway of the local mosque while a service was happening. And he was arrested. And so Susan calls Jim and Bob because she feels like she needs help. And so it starts with this moment that is objectively horrible. And yet these uncles who don't know their nephew very well feel like they need to go help their sister. And so it starts on this really complex note of family loyalty, but also acknowledging that what he did was awful. And everyone in the book acknowledges that. So Jim is getting ready to go on a vacation with his wife and with his boss. So he's like, well, I can't really cancel. So Bob is the one who's chosen to go to Shirley Falls. And he just feels out of his depth completely. But he goes and he tries to be a comfort. He can't actually represent Zach because he does not have a license to practice in Maine. But he's sort of supposed to coordinate the effort and just be there to advise Susan and her son about what's happened. So you do get a perspective of someone who was in the mosque at the time of this event. The bulk of the Muslim community in Shirley Falls have moved there from Somalia. And like there's a local minister who is working to try to help them integrate into the community. And so you see her actions, and she tries to reach out to Bob and to the Burgess family to make connections and to just bring some understanding to what has happened. Anyway, just all these little threads that come together so beautifully. I found myself so moved by the characters who are flawed in many ways, right? They make mistake after mistake, and yet they find a way to show love for one another, to try to forgive things from childhood that have happened. One big element that happened is when the Burgesses were quite small, they were in a car getting ready to go somewhere, and their dad went to check the mail, and Bob inadvertently put the car into reverse, and it killed their father. And so Bob has had to live with this event his entire life, knowing that he killed the father and caused their mother and them a lot of suffering. Their mother, in many ways, took that out on Susan. She was much more favorable to the boys than she was to her only daughter. And so all these gender politics within the family. Anyway, it's incredibly complex, so beautiful. That same gorgeous writing is there on every page. And so I was just really blown away. So if you haven't read Strout, you can really start anywhere, but you do have ahead of you this wonderful extended group of books that all kind of wind around each other in the same place in Maine. So this one is Elizabeth Strout's The Burgess Boys, but I would highly recommend any of her books.
Oh, I love that, Jen. And I, shortly after you and I met, you had recommended her work, and I read My Name is Lucy Barton.
Oh, yeah.
Which was beautiful. But I haven't read any of the others, so that makes me want to go back.
Oh, you have so many good things ahead of you. I think I have 2 books on her backlist that I still need to read, and then she's publishing another book this year. And so, yeah, I'm getting close to being an Elizabeth Strout completionist.
I love it. That's awesome.
All right. Well, we would love to know what backlist authors you're thinking about for this year's challenge. If you've read either Sutanto or Strout, what books you may have loved by them or not loved so much by them. We are going to close out our episode with the Lit Chat game. And today's question is, where do you get your book recommendations? What about you, Ashley?
Well, it's funny that we just talked about Elizabeth Strout. My dear friend Jen is my number one book recommender. So thank you, Jen. And that has been true since, so I moved to Virginia in 2012, and we were in the same English department at the school that I started teaching at. And really, I mean, you kind of opened my door, Jen, to like reading way more YA, fantasy. I mean, even though I was teaching English, I really wasn't reading a lot of young adult before I got to know you and some of the other people in the department. And so that was amazing. And so, yeah, I would say like you have been a big recommender for me. Beyond that, I definitely have in our Unabridged community, like there are other people who read along with us who I've really gotten to know. And I look a lot at what they're reading and what they like. And I have definitely learned, as many of you who are listening to us, you've probably learned like what things you have in common with each of us as readers. But that's been a great way to find books as well. I do keep up with the larger Bookstagram community. I do like to keep up with like the bookshop.org information. Libro has great recommendations. So I do kind of trust some of the places that are publishing books and releasing books. I use some of those as ways to find good reads as well. But largely it's coming from the bookish community and my bookish friends. And that has been a really good fit for me. And I will say like that has really enriched my reading life. So I think for those of you who are like in a slump, finding ways to get good recommendations is like so important for like helping keep momentum going and helping you. It's not that every book has to be recommended by someone, but I've just found that before I had as vibrant of a recommendation life, I would get stuck more often because I would pick something up randomly. And then if it didn't work, then I didn't have something ready to go next. So yeah. What about you, Jen? Where do you get your bookish recommendations from? A lot of places. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I'm pretty compulsive about consuming bookish content. So definitely Bookstagram, like Ashley, you were talking about our bookish community. I feel like a lot of the people who listen or who participate in our buddy reads and book club chats, they are reading the kinds of books that I like. So I love following them and seeing what they're reading and loving. I love Book Riot as a source. I find that they really extend my reading life. They are always challenging their readers to read more widely and more diversely, and they have great recommendations from a lot of people. I listen to a lot of bookish podcasts, and yeah, so just all the places. The New York Times list. I mean, I'll just read a book list anywhere. NPR has some amazing lists. So I subscribe to a lot of newsletters and just make a habit of reading a lot of things daily. And I just add things to my list. My list is incredibly, ridiculously long of things that I want to read. But I find that just adding things to the list sort of makes it stick it better in my brain. So I might come back to it later. But yeah, it's really everywhere. I do a lot of buddy reads on Instagram. So yes, that's somebody else choosing my reading, but I also find that we have great discussions. And I know my people who are choosing books that will challenge me in some way and that will lead me to read something maybe I wouldn't have picked up on my own. And sometimes my students give me books too, which I love.
Oh, I love that. So I'm so curious, Jen, like where do you keep up with what you want to read? Like what are some ways that you have that at your fingertips?
So I do have a bookish spreadsheet where I keep the books I have read. And I also have a tab on it with, for example, the authors who I want to read their backlist. So Elizabeth Strout is on there. And I have listed the books of theirs that I haven't read. And then if it's something I already own, which is often on my e-reader or on my bookshelf, I sort of highlight those in a different color so I can get to those more quickly. As far as upcoming reads, like my actual TBR, I keep that in Google Keep. But yeah, for just sort of longer range, hey, maybe I want to read this someday, I keep a separate list. So yeah, you can use like a bookstore that you use. Sometimes they'll allow you to create a wish list or something. But yeah, I keep that list separately than the more targeted TBR or this author, someone I want to complete their backlist works. So
I love that.
All right. Well, we'd love to know, too, how do you get your book recommendations? Are there sources you found that we don't know about? Because sadly, I always want to add to my list, my very long list, even though, it's one of those mountains I will never fully climb. But that's okay. It's aspirational.
Well, and I know, Jen, that I'm not the only one that very much appreciates that hard work that you do. And it also enriches my reading life. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people in our bookish community. So Thank you for helping us find great books.
Well, thank you. That was a big compliment. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening. We hope you're joining us on the Unabridged Podcast Reading Challenge. You can find more information about that on our website. And if you're interested in picking up your own reading spreadsheet, if you subscribe to our newsletter, we do have a copy there. You can make your own copy and adjust it if you want, but you can kind of see where I start. We have a simple version and a complex version, which is the one I use from day to day, but the simple version may be a good place to start there. So, all right, thanks again for listening. Do you have comments or opinions about what you heard today? We'd love to hear them. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Unabridged Pod, or on the web at unabridgedpod.com for ways to support us. To get more involved, you can sign up for our newsletter, join a buddy read, or become an ambassador. Thanks for listening to Unabridged.